All right, good evening. Feels like forever.
I know, doesn't
It's
it?
like been a while. It's like,
ages.
it
I
has
say
been.
that to you before.
What kind of conference did you go to?
I went to Torah Masura conference in New York for Menalim principles. It was very, very useful. Very, very useful. A lot of good meetings, but I'm glad to be back.
Okay, we know that it wasn't what I saw in my head, but I saw a very funny image in my head. I saw Rabbi Loiterman going to a conference with like 40 to 100 other Rabbi Loitermans.
No, it's basically similar. It's basically like that, yes.
They sell a joke.
That is correct. We are at Itmar. It has been said, where there were two dots. So it's the first word on the line. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 lines down. Itmar. Rav Huna had told us a rule called of a chazaka, and that is that since an animal, when it's alive, is prohibited to be eaten. It's usher to be eaten. So therefore, you need to verify that the shechita is valid in order to remove it from that chazaka. Right? You have an established chazaka, so then the chazaka remains. Okay, that's Rav Huna's statement. And then Rav Huna had gone further and said, once you know that it's a kosher shechita, you need to know there's a problem with it in order to remove it from shechita. You can rely on the chazaka for that as well. So the chazaka is pretty strong in this case. So in that same category, Itmar, it has been said, Hashochit b'sakin, if somebody's doing shechita on a animal, and he, with a particular knife, and v'nimtzeis peguma, and then after he does several shchitas, right, he doesn't check the knife, and then at the end he checks the knife and he finds that it's got a blemish in the knife, right? Problem of knives with blemishes is that when you are going along, then your knife will get snagged on the trachea, the esophagus, and will tear instead of slice. So therefore, you've got to worry about these little nicks that are in your knife. The nicks in the knife are no good, okay? So he realizes at the end, the question that we have to address here is, at what point did that nick occur? And therefore, how many of these animals that he's been shechting are no good? So, Amar Rav Huna says, Afilu shiber ba'atzamos kol hayom. Right? Even if after the shechita you've been chopping bones with this knife the whole time, okay? And it would seem that it makes reasonable sense why the knife has a nick in it, because you've been chopping bones after you finished your shechita, and now you're chopping bones with it. So then, nevertheless, psula, the shechita is going to be pasul. Why? Chayshinon shema ba'or nifgema. We don't know when the knife got bad. We know the knife was good when we started, but at some point after the shechita, now it's no good. We could say it's because of the bones, but it also could be that it got caught on the skin of the animal when it was first starting, and if it got caught on the skin of the animal, then the shechita is no good.
The skin of the animal is soft. How could it get stuck?
I guess it can catch, right? I guess it can catch. You know, it's leather, so.
Yeah.
Right? So, Rav Chisda says, Kshera. Rav Chisda says, no, it's kosher shechita because Shema be'etzem nifgema. It makes more sense for us to presume that it got the animal, that it got blemished on a bone. Okay, so now, Bishlama Rav Huna. We understand Rav Huna kishmate, right? This is what he said before, that we had a behema. Normally we said when it's alive, it's a chazaka of it's being prohibited, right? So therefore, until you know that it's shechted. So now, we don't know whether it was shechted with a kosher knife or with a non-kosher knife. Therefore, you have to presume that it remains usher. That's very clean, right? That's Rav Huna's perspective, right? It was prohibited. Now the animal is in doubt because I don't know whether the knife was blemished before or after the shechita. Therefore, it remains prohibited. It's usher because of the chazaka. Ela Rav Chisda, but according to Rav Chisda, he says it's kosher. My time, what is his rationale? Why would he say that? So Amar Lach, he's going to say to you, Rav Chisda is going to say to you, etem vadai pogame, or suffik pogame, suffik lo pogame. He says, if you take your nice fragile shechita knife and you whack it against a bone, you're going to damage your knife. That's definite. The skin, maybe, right? Maybe not. So therefore, havi safek uvadai. We have a circumstance where we have a definite thing that causes a blemish on a knife, and we have something that might cause a blemish on the knife. Vein safek motzi midei vadai. So we cannot presume that the doubtful thing occurred when we could presume that the definite thing occurred. This is a little bit different than normally when we have a suffix and a vadai. Just to point out that we have suffix and a vadai generally speaking throughout Shas. Suffix and vadai, we have a doubtful situation and we have a definite situation. Let's say, for example, somebody says, you owe me money. And the other one says, I'm not sure. Right? So one has a vadai claim, a definite claim, and the other one says, I don't know. Vadai is better than the suffix. The definite claim is better than but that is different because the vadai, the definite, and the suffix are in direct contradiction to each other. This suffix and vadai are not in direct contradiction. It could be both. In other words, yes, definitely the bone breaks the knife, but also the skin might. Both things could be true, right? So it is an interesting thing that the Gemara still uses this phrase, suffix in suffix yotzim midei vadai, even though this is not a direct contradiction. We're still going to say, according to Rav Chisda, since you have a rational approach, right, to what might have occurred here, you're going to go by, right, whatever is more reasonable. And so that's basically saying the more reasonable thing to presume is that the knife got damaged by the bone, and therefore he holds the shchita is acceptable. Masiv Rava l'sayua l'Rav Huna. So Rava asks a question, in order to support Rav Huna's perspective, right? Rav Huna says it's possible. So let's say we have a circumstance. Taval, let's say a person goes to the mikvah. Ve'olah, and he comes out of the mikvah. Nimta alav davar chotzetz, and he realizes he's got a Band-Aid on. Okay, so now he's after he comes out. Now, or no, let's not say a Band-Aid because I know he definitely put it there. Let's say the guy's got a string, right? He's got a string on his toe or something. He's got some kind of something on him.
Splint, for example.
Well, he's got something on him, right? So, afal pi shenis asik ba'oso hamin kol hayom kulo. He might have been, before he went to the mikvah, been using that kind of thing all day long. So it makes sense. Where did he get that string tied to his toe from? The answer is he's been in the shop and he's been working with that string all day long. And so it makes good sense that the string came from before he went to the mikvah and therefore was a chatzitza. So therefore, lo alsa, lo tevila, the tevila does not count unless he can say, I checked and I know it wasn't there before, then you have to presume that you were in a situation, you had a circumstance of a chazaka that you were tameh. You don't know whether it was from before or after. Therefore, you have to presume that it was from before.
Even if you check, you have to make sure you got the string before you go in.
That's correct, right. So this is it. So if he checks and he knows there was nothing there, so then he can rely on the fact that it probably it was on him after he came out. So that's the way that works. But suffik hava alei, suffik lo hava alei, if he doesn't know whether it was on him or not, kasi suffik umotzi midei vadai. The doubt is coming and beating the definite, right? Which is against Rav Chisda. The doubt, because what are we saying? Maybe it was on from before him. So you see the doubt beats out the definite. So that's Rava's answer to a question on Rav Chisda in support of Rav Huna. So the Gemara says, no, Shani Hasam. That is a different case because the Ikala Meimar, Hamed Tameh al Chezkaso. So he says, well, what happens is that this person was definitely Tameh beforehand. So therefore, when the suffix happened with his Tevila, right, we don't know whether he had the Chatzitza or not. So we're going to leave him on his Chazaka as to what he was before. The Ema lo Taval. So therefore, we're going to say, right, maybe he didn't go to the mikvah, right? And therefore his tumah is still upon him. So hachanami. So then why don't we say the same thing by the cow, right? Hachanami. Ha made behema al cheskasa. So the animal was alive. There was no shchita. Ve'emar lo nishchata. And so we should say, then shchita was not performed, right? We'll say shchita is not performed on it. And therefore it's still not kosher. Can't say that though, because harei shchuta lefanecha, you've got a dead animal right here with its neck sliced open. Say you can't really say that the shchita did not happen. Okay, so hachanami. Well, then you could say to the guy he's standing here soaking wet, harei tava lefanecha. He's right here and he went to the mikvah. I mean, whatever way you're looking at it, at the end of the day, the cases are ultimately similar. So he says ha is yalida be reusa. So he says, well, but 1 second, the problem is on the guy. Right? The pagam, the problem, this guy, can he go to the mikvah with a chatzitz on him? No, he can't. So therefore, the problem is on him. So hachanami. So what are you talking about? By the shechita of the behema is yalda bereusa. The problem is in the shechita also, right? We've got a knife; it's no good. So the knife also, the shechita is also ruined. So what's the answer? He goes, no, you're missing the point. Sakin Isra'i, behema lo Isra'i. It's the knife that the question is, not on the animal. So take a look at the cases, right? I have a human being, he is tameh. He might have gone to the mikvah, might not have, because we don't know if he has a chatzitz on him or not. That's a question on him. Since there's a question on him, the chazaka stands. On the other hand, we have a cow. The cow is not kosher because it's alive. We do shchita. Fair enough, okay? And now we have a problem with the knife, not with the cow. Therefore, how can you say the chazaka on the cow remains when the problem got started with the knife, not the cow? The cow is perfectly shechted, which means that the chazaka is gone. The problem is with the knife. So you didn't invalidate the shechita, you invalidated the knife. Different cases. That's why he says those are different. Okay, so we've defended Rav Chisda a little bit. Doesn't necessarily knock off Rav Chisda.
It feels kind of like splitting hairs, though.
No pun intended, right? Splitting cows or whatever it is, yes. But it's not, right? Because the object, right? Chazaka, how does a chazaka work? A chazaka works that an object retains its existing status because nothing has acted upon it. Or you're in doubt whether something has acted upon it.
That has to be 3 times, right?
The cow is the object. It is not in doubt, right? The human being is the thing that's in doubt. So that's why it sounds like you're splitting hairs, but it is a profound distinction. Okay, Meisvei. So we're going to ask another question on Rav Chisda from a different brisa. Shochet es havesht v'achar kach nishmita hagargeres. Okay, he's going cross section. Here's our biology. Right, okay? If you cut the head of the animal off and you look straight into its neck, it looks like this, okay? This is the bottom of the neck. They put it on top because the animal's flipped over upside down. So this is your trachea and your esophagus, right? The kana and vesh, as we call it in Hebrew. You've got blood vessels here and here, and then you've got a spine bone here with the spinal column in the middle, right? So you're doing shchita, and you're starting here, and you've got a slice, and you've got to go through most of these two, right? That's how you're supposed to cut through, okay? He's cutting, and he goes all the way down, and he hits the bone, okay? So he's doing shchita, and he hits the neck. So, shachat es havesht, right? So, this is a case where he's actually in a bird. So, therefore, v'achar kach nishmita hagargeres. And now, I'm sorry, I should have shown this picture. This is not this picture. This is a case where there's a bird. This is actually a case. This is what the bird looks like. Okay, so the bird has. This is the smaller one. It's a bird. It's same basic look, but the issue with a bird different than a animal when you do the shechita is that with an animal you have to shech through most of both of this, the kana and the vesh. With a bird, you only have to shech through one, not both. Okay, so what happens is he shechts through one of them, and then the other one becomes dislodged. So we had a circumstance, we talked a little bit about it on Thursday, right, where you can theoretically get the trachea and the esophagus become dislodged prior to the shechita. That is going to invalidate your shechita. If it becomes dislodged from the throat, that's going to ruin your shechita. So what's happened is he's cut one of the pipes, but now the other one becomes dislodged on the bird. So that's what he's got as his circumstance. Okay? So then in that circumstance, it's kshera. Why is it kosher? Because you only need to cut one of the pipes with the bird. Okay? So nishmita hagargeres. However, what happens if first the esophagus comes loose? V'achar kach shachat es havesht, and then you shach the trachea afterwards, then it's psula, then it's possible. Because the animal is already, once it's already dislodged, then the shechita is no good. If you shacht first, you get one of them first, and then the other one becomes dislodged, it's fine, you did shechita already, right? Because you can do whatever you want to the bird after it's already shechted. But if it comes apart first, and then you shacht one, that's no good. Okay? Shachat es havesht. Now, let's say you did the shechita on the vesht, this is the trachea. Nimtzeis hagargeres shemuta. And then we find that the esophagus is now dislodged. You don't know, when did it come loose, before or after, right? If it came loose before, then the shchita is no good. So then, kodem shchita nishmata o la'achar shmita nishchata. Zehaya maisa. This actually happened, just in one case. V'amru, and the Chachamim said, kol safek b'shchita pasul. Right? If you have a doubt circumstance when it comes to shchita, so then it's pasul. Right? Sounds like you're holding by the chazaka rule, right? Because it was not kosher before, and now it remains. You don't know whether it's kosher or it's not kosher. You've got to presume it remains not kosher.
3 times is it? Have to be three times before it's chazaka?
Different type of chazaka, right? It's a good point because we're going to talk about multiple types of chazaka, right? Chazaka means that based on a presumed status, I can assume that is the status even without further proof. Okay, that can happen in multiple ways. One way, as Yehuda's talking about, is a chazaka is when something happens 3 times, then that is an established practice, and then it remains in that status. That is one type of chazaka. This type of chazaka is when I can confirm that something is in one state, I can presume that it remains in that state until something happens to it, right? As we say, an object in motion remains in motion unless another force acts upon it. Basically, that's the concept of chazaka, right? If it's doing something, then that's what it is. If it's not kosher, it's still not kosher until something happens to make it kosher. If this animal was not kosher, you did or you didn't do shchita, you don't know, therefore it remains not kosher. Okay? So now, kol safek b'shchita lasuye mai. When this Brisa says every time you have something that's a doubt in shchita, what is it coming to include, right? Lav la'asuye kahai gafna. Are we not talking about to include even cases where there's a question about the knife, right? Even in those circumstances, it's a doubt in the shchita, therefore, Rav Huna is correct and it's pasul. So the answer is no, not necessarily. La'asuye safek shahas, safek daras. We could have other questions about the shchita. What if the guy isn't sure whether he delayed or not during the shchita, or he's not sure if he pushed down and he chopped when he was doing the shchita? Umayshna. So then, what's the difference between the 2 types of suffix then? Why are you making a distinction? So, hasam is yalida beireusa bebehema hacha sakin isra'i behema lo isra'i. It's a difference again, whether you're talking about the suffix is in the animal or whether the suffix is in the knife. The knife is a separate entity, so therefore it doesn't impact the shchita. You can't presume the shchita is a problem just because the knife is. The Gemara concludes, the halacha is, in fact, we're on Yudam base. The halacha is like Rav Huna, though. As long as you have not broken a bone after you've done shchita, right? Because you don't necessarily know if you've broken the knife in that circumstance, right? So therefore, we will say that it might have happened by the skin. But the halacha would be like Rav Chisda. If you know that you were breaking bones, then at that point Rav Chisda is correct, right? You know that that's what it is, so therefore you have to presume that it was. You can presume that it was because of the chopping of the bones that caused the knife to break. Okay, so now miklal, that is to imply that Rav Chisda, that according to Rav Chisda, afagav delo shiber ba'etzem. That means that what you're saying is the halacha is like Rav Chisda when he broke a bone. That means if Rav Chisda say if he's chopping bones but he doesn't break the bone, then what? Then Rav Chisda would agree with Rav Huna and say that it's no good. El b'mai ifgim. So then in what circumstance, what would be the cause of the blemish? Ema be'etzem dimafrekes ifgim. The answer is it's the neck bone, the bone in the neck. In other words, he wasn't chopping, but nevertheless, we could presume that the knife is no good. Why? Because of the picture that I was supposed to show you now, which is that when he's slicing and he hits the neck bone in the middle of the slice, right? So you don't have to be chopping bones. You could be just doing regular shchita, and you might accidentally hit this bone, in which case that could be the cause of your knife's blemish, okay? However, right, then we don't hold like Rav Chisda on that part, right? Hava uvda, there was once a case like this, v'taraf Rav Yosef ad tleisar chevasa. Rav Yosef made 13 animals. They shechted with the knife and they didn't check the knife in between. Okay? And Rav Yosef, right, they found that the knife was blemished at the end, and Rav Yosef said that all the animals are now no good. So come on. So who are we holding like now? Who is this like? It's Rav Huna. So this is like Rav Huna's answer, right? Because we're presuming that it got stuck on right. It wasn't the bones that caused it, because there were no bones that he was breaking. So we must presume that it got stuck on the neck of an animal, right? And so therefore it is, all the shchitas are no good. So, well, then if it's Rav Huna, right, afilu b'kamaisa, then even the first animal, right? So Rav Yosef, then even the first one should be not good as well, because we don't know which neck the knife got stuck on. Could have been the very first animal. So therefore, even the first one, right? No, not necessarily. It's Rav Chisda. So this is like Rav Chisda's lebarmi kamaisa, and it could be like according to Rav Chisda. He might be making a psak like Rav Chisda, and all the animals are no good. When he says all the animals are no good, he doesn't mean the first one. The first one is for sure good because the skin is not going to ruin it. But once he shechts the first animal, he might have hit the neck bone, at which point he might have hurt the knife. Then all subsequent animals are no good. So if you've got 13 animals that you've shechted, if it's according to Rav Huna, all 13 are no good. But if it's according to Rav Chisda, only 12 would be no good.
But just so I understand,
Yeah.
For the process to be kosher,
Yes.
Like you have to get through like the trachea, and
Yes. And the esophagus. That's
You
correct.
don't have to make it that far to that other bone that could be nicking the knife.
That is correct. If we look at our cow from side view, right? So you've got your two pipes over here, right? And then the bones are behind it.
Right.
So therefore, if you are good at your shechita and you can cut through and know when to stop so that you get just through the trachea and the esophagus and stop before you get to the neck bone,
Right.
then you'll protect your knife better.
Yes.
Right? That's the safest thing to do.
Okay. So ideally, that's what's required. The trachea, the esophagus. You don't make it to that bone. then-
Correct. Then you're good. But Rav Chisda is going to say that you can't know that you didn't get that far to the bones, whatever. So therefore, if you didn't check your knife, you have to presume as soon as you check your knife, you go, okay, then we never nicked the knife, right? But if you didn't check and then you find it at the end, you have no way of knowing that during one of the shchitas, and it could have been the very first one. But if it's the very first one, remember that you severed the trachea and the esophagus before you got to the first bone, which means the first one is kosher. Right? If you're Rav Huna, you nick the knife over here on the skin. So therefore, even the first animal is not kosher because you ruined the knife before you even got to your trachea and esophagus. Good?
Yeah.
And the shochet wouldn't be
Feeling it?
feeling that they're. That
I don't know.
that
It's a good question.
dragging, right? Like when you,
Maybe we would, but at the end of the day,
it
right?
would, like start to get caught.
At the end of the day, you have a nicked knife.
When you hear when you hear a clink, you know you go.
That's correct. That's correct. There's a clinking sound. That's it.
My guess is that in this day and age, they probably check the knife before. Like
They would do every single one. That's correct. I would. Yeah. You don't want to. That's like, if you're in a rush and you're doing like a recipe that calls for like 6 eggs and you just like crack all the eggs into like one. You just keep. Because if that last egg has a blood spot, you just like dumped it into the glass and you just messed up all your eggs, right?
Exactly.
That's the risk. I do that all the time. Like I need to have like 6 eggs, just like cracking. At the end, I'm looking to make sure, right? But if one of the eggs, then I ruin all of them, right? But you're supposed to check in between each one. That way you can not mess them up. These cows are a lot more valuable. Drives my wife crazy when I do this. So.
Well, what, have you kept track of your odds? Like 1 out of every how many times?
I maybe in my life have found 1 egg or 2 eggs that have been
Okay,
with
and you
blood
threw out
spots.
the whole thing, but that,
correct, but
but on those numbers,
I figure that's
the odds.
that's my thinking, right?
yeah, you've done right. You've
It
done
also
right.
depends on at what point in the recipe.
I will tell you, if you're making meringues and you're separating egg whites,
Or souffle.
That's a lot of work.
Or souffles.
yeah. So
You're saving time.
okay, okay. V'ibois ema, or else if you want to say Karav Huna, that Rav Yosef is following Rav Huna Dei Karav Chisda, because if he was holding Rav Chisda, Michdi. Let's take a look. Mitla Talinon. So then, what we're saying is we're going to we're just explain. According to Rav Chisda, he's explaining away the scenario that's possible that could make the least number of animals not kosher, essentially. So, in which circumstance, who says that the knife got damaged on the first animal, on the first animal's neck? Maybe it was the last one, in which case that this statement that all of the animals are not kosher is Rav Huna, and Rav Chisda would say only the very last animal is not kosher because that's the only one that you can say for sure was no good. Otherwise, you could say it could have been fine all the way up until that last point. Amar le Rav Acha.
Even the last one you can't say for sure was no good though, right? Because
it could have been clinked on the
clinked on the bone. Yeah.
That's true, right? That's a good point. Does it?
I guess you checked the knife.
Maybe you're right. Maybe he's saying that even in that one that he would say all of the according to Rav Chisda, everyone is kosher. I was presuming, right? Yeah, I think you're right.
Yep.
I think that in the bottom line is if you were holding Rav Chisda, they're all kosher, right? It's a good point. Yeah, I was missing that point. Amar Rav Acha Brei de Rav Rav Ashi. So Rav Acha, the son of Rava, sister of Ashi, Rav Kahana matzrich b'dikusa bein kol chada v'chada. Rav Kahana said, check the knife between every single animal. Right, that is good practice. Yep. Right, Kiman, who's he holding like? Kirav Huna. He's holding like Rav Huna, right? Because you have to worry that maybe, right, the nick was in the neck at the beginning of the shechita, and therefore by checking the knife between each one, you'll know if this, right? Because if you find a blemish, then this animal is not kosher. Right, best not to eat it. Right, so and therefore, what Rav Huna's
the cow has a blemish right now.
Right, so yeah, he's half open. So lemifsol kamaisa. What you're going to do is you're going to actually make that first animal puzzle by if you check that knife afterwards and you find a blemish in it, then that first animal is no good. So no, not necessarily. Maybe this is Rav Chisda. Maybe he's saying like Rav Chisda, lachshuri basraisa. What he's trying to do is check the knife in order to tell you to know whether the next animal is kosher. This animal, even if you found, right, if you've done one animal and then you check the knife and it's no good afterwards, that animal's still kosher because Rav Chisda says it's still kosher. It's the next one. You can't keep going. That's why he told him to check between each one. So ihachi, if that's true, so tiboy nami bedikas chacham. So then. He says, why then? If that's the case, right? Why would we should require him to go back to the chacham, the wise person in the city, right, and have him check it, right? So Rav Kahana doesn't suggest that. He just says, you just need to check it. So therefore, what Rav Kahana is saying that it's enough that the shochet is checking it afterwards. Why? Because eid echad ne'eman b'isurin. Because it doesn't, this is not an official checking that's required. This is a rule of one person is able to be believed when it comes to prohibitions. Therefore, Rav Kahana is saying, right? That's why we don't need to check, but a regular checking in between is going to be sufficient. That's why we ask, well, why not have the chacham check every time? The answer is no, you don't need that. If that's true, so if that's the case, if you just need a person to check the knife to make sure it's kosher, then that should always be the case. You don't ever need to go ask the Rav to check your knife. So Rabbi Yochanan says, the answer is no. They had the minhag, the custom is to show it to the head of the place, right? The main Rav. Why? That gives him kavod to get started, right? That made the takana as part of the process is to show kavod to the Rav. You show him the knife first. After that, it's practical. Once it becomes practical, anybody can check the knife, right? You can show it to an official knife checker. It doesn't have to be the chacham.
Would Rav Kahana say the same thing by the Korban Pesach when all of Am Yisrael is there gathered together and they all need to get there pretty quickly?
Yeah, and so you're saying that they all have to have their shechita knives checked by a chacham in the first place?
No, like between each and every shechting. Like, would Rav Kahana say the same thing?
I would imagine so. I would have to imagine so. As I say, haste makes waste in this circumstance, right? If you wind up finding out it's bad after you've done like 5 of them, right? But theoretically, the Kohen himself or the person who's doing the shechita, who doesn't even have to be a Kohen, could be the guy who checks. It might not be a very lengthy process.
If you have a charlotte, you didn't bring it to a rabbi or the Kohen or whatever it is.
So, okay, now we get into some meaty gemaras here. Okay, Minoha mils damar rabbanan, oki milse achaz ke. Right, there's no pun intended. We have a rule, generally speaking, that we follow a chazaka. How do we know? Like that's like we always take for granted everywhere. Like chazaka, like that's a thing. How do we know that this is the idea? We've been relying on this statement for comes to shechita that just because the animal was not kosher before, it remains not kosher. Who says that's the case? So Amar Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani says Amar Rabbi Amar Kroth, there's a pasuk that says it. V'yatza kohen min habayis el pesach habayis v'yisgiras habayis shivas yamin. When the kohen comes to check a house that has tsaras, okay, so he's got to walk into it, he's got to investigate, he's got to take a look and see if the house has tsaras. Then what does the kohen do? He doesn't declare that it has tsaras while he's inside, because the tumas ohel that will be in the room will make him tummy as well. We don't want that. So the kohen leaves the house, the yotzei kohen, the kohen leaves the house, right, to the opening of the house. He closes the door, v'yisgiras habayis, shivas yom, he closes it for 7 days. Now, how does he?
Has that suit?
So it does not going to help you with tuma. So the question is, how does the kohen know? Dilma adenofik v'asa botzer le'shiura. Maybe as soon as he walks out the door of the house, the tsaras got smaller. And therefore, how does he know to say? Because I just saw it a second ago, now I walk out, it must be still a problem. Why? Ella lav mishum damrin. Okay, chazke. The answer is because of the chazaka. He just saw it. He walked out. 2 seconds later, he can presume it's still a problem. Because why? Because of the chazaka. That's how we know chazaka works. Very good, right? Maskif lo Rav Acha Bar Yaakov. Rav Acha Bar Yaakov says, no, not necessarily. V'dilma kagon shiyotza derech hachorav. Maybe the kohen is walking out backwards. Dikachazi le kinafak. He's looking at the blemish. It's over there on that wall, and he's walking out backwards. And as he's walking out, he sees it the whole time. There's no chazaka. He's watching it. So Amar le Abaye says shtei tshuvas b'davar. 2 things. Right? Got 2 answers. Chada diyitzia derech hachoros lo shma yitzia. First of all, walking out backwards is not called walking out. That's not walking out. That's backing out, whatever it is. V'yatza, the word v'yatza sounds like you're walking straight out. Ve'od, second of all, achoria delis, what if the blemish happens to be behind the door? Right? You're walking out, it's on this wall. So therefore you can't see the wall that you're backing out of, you can only see the wall across. What if it's behind the door on this side? You can't see it. So then you're relying on chazaka for sure. So v'chitema de pasach be kavsa. Maybe what you have to do is you have to poke a window in the door so you can see. So v'atznan, we learn in the Mishnah, bayis afel, if you have a dark house, so ein posken bo chalonos l'rosas nego, then you're not supposed to, in order to allow the kohen to get a better look at the nega, make windows in it. Whatever the lighting of the house is, that's the lighting. That's what the kohen has to do to investigate. If you can't see it in whatever lighting the house normally has, it's not a nega. But what do we see? There's no obligation to start punching holes in walls and doors in order to be able to give the kohen a better look. So therefore, they're not punching holes in it. Therefore, he couldn't see it. He can rely on the chazaka. Amar le Rava. Rava says to Abaye, de kamart. 1 second. What did you just tell me? You just told me something. You said, Yitzia derech hachorav lashma yitzia. Walking out backwards is not leaving. Kohen Gadol b'Yom HaKippurim yochiach. 1 second. On the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, how does he leave the Kodesh Kodashim? Right? When we leave shul, right? Everybody backs out. Why? Because the Kohen Gadol did that in the Kodesh Kodashim when he left the Kodesh Kodashim. Dichsiv be'yitzia. And there, in the pasuk, it says, Yatza Kohen Gadol mi beis HaKodesh Kodashim. And it says, Ubalo derech knisaso. So it says that he's supposed to come back the way that he comes. He's supposed to go out the way that he comes in. Okay, so that means that is Yitzia. Walking it backwards is Yitzia. So you're wrong. That's number 1. Uda kamart. Number 2. Bayis afelim poschavo chalos rosas nigo. As far as not poking holes into the walls and windows, creating windows. Hani mili hecha delo is chazak. That's because there's no chazaka in the first place. We don't even know it yet. Aval, hecha dis chazak is chazak. But now, right, once we've already clarified and seen that there is a nega, well now, in order to declare it, maybe I do have to keep an eye on it. So I don't poke a hole in the wall in order to get more light to determine if it's a nega. But once I have determined it's a nega, maybe I do poke a hole in the wall, right? So, doesn't prove anything from the chazaka. Rava's questions say this doesn't prove chazaka. Abaye still says that's my proof. Okay, Tanya delok Rav Acha Bar Yaakov. We have a brisa that does not support Rav Acha Bar Yaakov, right? Who says, right, that we're not going to rely on chazaka, right? Okay. So he says like this. V'yatza hakohen min habayis. The kohen walks out of the house. Yachol yelech letoch beiso v'yaskir. Maybe what it means is the kohen leaves the house, goes home. When he gets to his house, he says, okay, that house that I saw earlier today is tameh, right? Talmud Lomar, El Pesach Abayis. He has to do it by the opening of the door. So he's supposed to be standing right there. He doesn't go home first. I Pesach Abayis, if he's supposed to do it by the opening of the door, Yachol Tachas Hamashkof, Yaskir, maybe he's supposed to be standing in the doorway still. And he should do it right when he's in the doorway. Talmud Lomar, Min Abayis. Therefore it says he leaves from the house. He's out of the house already. So therefore, Hachi Yetzi Min Abayis Kulo. He's got to be completely out of the house. So Hakate said, how does he do it? Omed B'tzad Hamashkof, he stands right outside, next to the door, Umaskir. And that's when he does it. So now, Uminayin Shim Halach L'toch Beis Over Hiskir. How do I know that? Let's say he went all the way home, and at that point he says it's Tameh. O Sh'amad B'toch HaBayis V'Hiskir. Or if he's in the house and he didn't leave, and now he says it's Tameh. How do I know Sheskiro Muskar that it's going to be Tameh anyway? You didn't do it right. He's Tameh anyway. Talmud Lomar Pasuk says V'Hiskir Abayis because he will. It says that he's going to close off the house. That he's going to be meaning Mikol Makom. In any event, there's a right way to do it. Right way to do it is step right outside the house and say it. But if you messed it up and you waited until you got home, or you did too early, then the house is still tamei. Okay, so that's the correctness to it. Okay, so now for Rav Acha, right, according to Rav Acha Bar Yaakov says you've got to back out of the door, right, and watch it and see. Well, no, because b'diavad, if you walked out and you didn't look at it at all, it would still be valid. So clearly, we're relying on this chazaka in some way. So Rav Acha Bar Yaakov kegon dekaimi dora de gavri. So he says, well, Rav Acha Bar Yaakov saying you can't rely on chazaka. So in that circumstance, how is he going to declare the thing tamei from home? And the answer is he's got telephone, right? What he does is he's got a whole line of people, and he's at his house, and he says, is it still there? Is it still there? Is it still there? All the way down to the next guy, until the guy who's standing right there says yes, yes, and then you yell it back, and he goes, okay, if it's still there, then right, you have one guy on his cell phone. Is it still there? Yes, it is. Okay, it is tummy. He has to verify. He can't rely on the chazaka. That doesn't mean he's relying on the chazaka. The guy has to say, yeah, like you saw it, it's still there. So therefore, it doesn't necessarily prove, right? According to Rav Acha Bar Yaakov, he doesn't say that this issue of this tuma proves chazaka in the Torah. Now, we have another way of determining something. We have something called a rov. Okay, rov beats chazaka. And rov is very powerful. So the question is, how do we know that the Torah tells us that you're supposed to go after the rov?
What's rov?
Rov means that it's a majority, right? A majority circumstance. So we're going to see there's multiple types of rov as well, but I don't want to give that away. We'll see that in a moment. First of all, Minolan, how do we know that? It says right in the Torah, right? You've got a based in, and you have to vote on deciding whether the guy's guilty or not. And you go by the majority. So therefore, you see, so therefore, we know that you're supposed to go by majority. Okay, yeah, but Ruba de'isa kamon, kigon tisha chanios. So he says, that's different. He says, because that is a majority case right here. That's like, for example, you have a piece of meat, you've got 9 butcher shops that are kosher, 1 butcher shop that's not kosher. Can you presume this piece of meat is kosher? Yes. Right? Because why? Called the parish miruba parish, right? Anything that comes out, it's come from the majority. You see 9 butcher shops right here, and 1 that's not here. So that is a standard case of majority. That's like a based-in. All these people are here, I'm following the majority. However, right? So the Sanhedrin, so I'm not asking about that. Sanhedrin, lokami boilan, that's not our question. I get it. Okay, the majority, if I've got a majority right here, that's not my question. Kikami boilan, the question that we're asking is Ruba Delese Kaman, what we would call a statistical majority. There's no majority here, but we say, generally speaking, that's the case, right? For example, most babies are born after 9 months, right? We would say most people sell with this intention, right? When somebody says, I'm selling you my house, this is what's included, this is what's not included. This is what we call a statistical majority. I don't have a majority of everybody here, right? The case in Bava Metzia, right? I lose an item, and if it's a location where most of the people are Jews, right? So what I have to count, right? Statistically speaking, the chances are, right? That's what we say. So that is a different type of chazaka. That's his question. In that circumstances, Ruba Delese, come on. We don't have the majority here, per se, but we have a presumption based on a statistical majority. Kagon, for example, katan uktana. Let's say you have we know the halacha.
Junior.
We have a halacha about yibum, right? A yibum and a yavama. So a person dies and he doesn't have any children. So his brother is supposed to marry his wife, okay? Let's say the girl is not yet mature yet. She's 10 years old, okay? And let's say the brother is 10 years old, okay? Now, they can't have children yet. They're too young. How do we know that there's a prohibition in the Torah, you're not allowed to marry your brother's wife? Okay, so now that means that if your brother has children with his wife and then he dies, you can't marry her, right? That's a prohibition. The Torah tells us because of Yibum, that prohibition is suspended and you're allowed to, right? So now, this Yavam, who is 10, wants to marry the Yavama, who is 10, so we shouldn't let them. Why? Because what if they grow up and they can't have children? The only reason why they're allowed to get married is because they'll be able to have children. If they can't have children, they can't get married. That means that there's a prohibition that's still in play, and it's actually prohibited for them to be married. So therefore, we should wait. The answer is no, we don't have to. Why? Because a katan and a ketana, most ketanim develop into men who can have children, and most ketanos develop into women who can have children.
Like 10 or 11?
When they get old enough, whatever age it is, but they at some point become adults. Most of the time. There are people who are not fertile, but most of the time they can. Therefore, that's a ruba de lesa. Come on, it's statistical majority. We don't have all the people here. We just know that that is the majority circumstance.
What about Tamar with Yehuda, with the third brother, that she had to wait to marry?
She didn't have to. Right? That's a potential. In other words, it was. Now, when we get to Yavamos, right, we will see that yes, there are circumstances, right, that whether he can or he can't, whether he's Roy Labia, whether he can have relations or he can't have relations, he has to be a certain age, over 9 potentially, but it could be that his third son was too young, or Yehuda was making, it sounds like in the Psukim that Yehuda's making excuses.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He could have.
Sorry, it was my bad.
Right? Yehuda was saying he just doesn't want his third son to die, and he was never planning on it. Right? So, okay, so the question is, how do we know that we can rely on the statistical majority? This is an exciting Gemara. There's 9 answers. The first, I think it's 9. The first few don't work. Okay, but you'll get the hang of this. Okay? Amar Rabbi Elazar says, Asya mireisha shel Ola. The answer is the head of the Ola. The head of the Ola Asya, right? Because, good picture. Oh, beautiful. Okay? The Ola has to get chopped into various pieces, right? Here's our cow, right? I was going to take a pencil and draw him up, right? To be able to see. You can see where he gets cut up, right? The head gets cut off, then you've got the front here, you've got this leg, you've got the side, you've got the back leg, you've got this back piece, and you've got the tail, right? Okay? And then you've got the other sides, right? It gets chopped into 11 pieces, I believe, right? Depending on whether it's for a bull or whatever it is. So you're supposed to chop it into pieces, okay? So the pasuk says, right? So now the head, right? So we're supposed to take the pasuk says, you're supposed to take it and cut this animal into pieces. So osa l'nesachim, you're supposed to cut it into pieces, v'lo nesachel l'nesachim. But once you've cut the animal into the appropriate parts, you're not supposed to cut those parts up into smaller parts. Okay? So you're supposed to bring it in this specific way, these specific pieces. Okay? These specific pieces. So now, when you take your ola, that means one thing you are not doing is you're not cutting into the skull, for example. Now, one of the blemishes that makes an animal a treifa is if the membrane in the skull, right, is broken. Right? If you've got a broken membrane in the skull, so here's a cutaway picture. Actually, this is a better one, right? Cows have small brains, right? So they've got a little brain up here, and up here there's this membrane that is over here, right? Theoretically, right, if I shecht my animal and I can't cut into the skull in order to verify, how do I know I can bring this as an ola? Maybe it is a treifa, and I never checked inside the skull, right? So therefore, v'nechush shema nikav krum shel moach. I should worry that inside this skull of this animal, which I'm never chopping open, right, is a broken membrane and the animal's treif. So Ella Lav Mishum Damrina and Zil Basaruba, the answer is you don't have to worry about that. Great news. Majority rules. Since most animals don't have a broken membrane, no need to dissect this animal and check. That's what the Torah is telling us. Therefore, that's our proof. You can rely on Rove, statistical Rove. Mimai, who says, though, Dilma de polileu bodakle. Maybe what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to cut it open, and you are supposed to check, right? But you're not supposed to completely sever and chop the piece off. Just peel it back, like in this picture, right? So if you peel it back a little bit, then you could check the membrane. Maybe that's what you're supposed to do. The pasuk is telling me I'm supposed to chop into pieces. It's not. It's still one piece, right? So maybe I'm supposed to check the membrane of the brain without chopping it into pieces. So Mishum osa ve'i mishum osa linsachal v'lo ninsachal linsachim. And if you tell me I'm not allowed to do that because I'm not supposed to cut it into pieces, that's only if you cut it completely into a separate piece. However, if all I do that is I cut it so that I can peel it open and it's still attached, so then that should be okay. Okay, so therefore that doesn't prove, the Ola doesn't prove that I'm relying on Rove. Because there is a way for me to check it. Mar Breder Ravina Omer, Mar the son of Ravina says, I'll tell you where you learn Rove. Asya mishviras etzem bepesach. We learn it from the fact that you're not allowed to break a bone of a korban pesach. Damar Rachman, the pasuk says, ve'etzem lo sish beruvo. Prohibition, you're not allowed to break any bones of korban pesach. Okay, now, I shecht my korban pesach. How do I know that the membrane in the head is not broken? I can't break open the skull and check. This is a better question because it's not like the Ola where I could cut it open and look. I have to crack the skull in order to check the membrane, and I'm not allowed to do that. I should worry and say maybe my korban pesach is treif, and so I should have to check the membrane. El alav mishum damrin and zil basaruba. Isn't it that we're allowed to go by the majority? Mimai, who says? Right? Maybe Dilma demanach gumarta ale v'kali leu badikle. Maybe there's a way to get into that skull without breaking the bones. And what you do is you take a burning hot coal and you put it on the skull, and the burning hot coal burns right through the bone, and then I can look inside without breaking the bone.
Why would that be calling a mum?
It's dead already.
Ah.
Yeah, I don't. You don't have to worry about, but you're going to eat it, right? So you don't have to worry about mums at that point. Detanya, as we learned in a brisa, that burning is not breaking. Hamechatech begidim. If somebody is eating his korban pesach and he breaks a sinew of the sinews are the parts that hold the bones and meat together, right? So you break one of those. So then, vehasorif batzamos, and also if somebody burns the bones, right? He's roasting his animal and he makes the bones burnt. So is that a problem of breaking the bones? Ein bo mishum shviras etzem. That is not a prohibition of breaking the bones. Therefore, burning through the bone is fine. So we do have a way to check inside the head of the animal. So that doesn't prove it.
What about if the coal burns the spot where there would have been a hole in the membrane?
It's a good point. You got to be careful, I guess. You got to be surgical about it, right? Put it in, hold it with a tweezer, I guess, and pull it out before it gets too deep, right? It's a good point. It's a very, because if you do that, then you're not going to solve your problem at all. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak Amar Rav Nachman Yitzchak says, Asya me'aliyah. What about learn from the tail of a sheep? Now, this is not a sheep. However, it is effective because it's pretty similar to a sheep. We'll just show it, right? The kidneys of this animal, getting good at this, right? are along the back of the animal, right? The kidneys are all along the top of the back. This is where the kidneys are, right? So the back tail part of the animal, right? So this is the shedra, right? And then here, this little piece that sticks out, this is the tail. The tail bones continue on. The sheep also has extended a small tail. When you bring a korban that is a sheep, the tail, the aliyah, gets burnt. The entirety of the tail gets burnt. So now, the pasuk Zomar Rachmana says, Chelbo ha'aliyah temima, right? You're supposed to bring the entirety of the tail unbroken. Okay, you're not supposed to break that tailbone up. So, all right, here's the anatomy of the sheep, right? So here's his kidneys in the back, on the back there, like we saw in the cow, right? And this is the tailbone. So when you cut this section off, right, this section cannot be opened or checked, right? Because it's complete, it has to be offered completely whole. So now, questions like this. V'leichush shema nifseka chut hashedra. How about the spinal cord? If a spinal cord is severed, then the animal's a treifa. So shouldn't you have to check the tail, right? The spinal cord goes all the way down the back of the animal. So then why shouldn't we have to check? That would require us to break open the tail in order to check. The fact that the Torah tells us you can't break open the tail means I don't have to check. Why don't I have to check? Rove, I'm okay. Alav, mishum damrinan, zil basaruva. It's because I'm going after the rove. Well, maybe, no. V'chitema demitatai pasik la. Maybe the answer is that that this is according to the opinion that says that you're only breaking, well, where are you breaking off this tail part, right? This tail part maybe is from below, right? This is where the tailbone here breaks into, like where the legs break off from the section here, and you're only taking off from here and below. The shedra, the spine, is only relevant up until the back legs. Okay, so therefore maybe you're cutting it off from here, and you're only taking the back part off, and therefore that part is irrelevant to the spinal column. So therefore it's not an issue. So the answer is no, because leumas ha'etza amar Rachmana. It says opposite the etza. What's the etza? The etza is the kidneys. Why are they called the etza? Because your brain, right, gives, well, not your brain, but thought is etza, and in halachic literature, the kidneys are responsible for decision-making and thought, right? So, there's a good joke about that, but we don't have time. So, therefore, these are where the kidneys are. You're actually breaking the tail off from up here, which means that there is a shedra there, okay? So, therefore, it is a fair proof, because if that's where the shedra is. So, mimai, who says, right? Maybe that who says it's because we're going after the rove? Maybe Dilma de pasach le badak le. So maybe what you have to do is you have to open up the tail and you have to check, make sure that the spinal column is good. V'mishum tamima, and if you're worried about you're going to blemish the tail, right? You're supposed to do it all complete, and here you're doing an operation on the tail. Maybe you're separating it out. That would only be a problem, like we said, by the skull of the animal if you completely cut pieces of the tail off. Here, you're only opening the tail up. Once you check and you see that the spinal cord is intact, then it's still one tail, and you can offer it. It's still attached. It's not a problem. So therefore, that doesn't prove it. Okay, so let's try again. Rav Sheshes, breder of Idi Amar, Rav Sheshes, the son of Idi, he says, Osya me egla arufa. The proof is from egla arufa, right? The calf that we are going to. Here's our picture, right? Our egla arufa, right? You've got our calf, and he's sitting there, he's down by the brook, by the river. We've got a murder that occurs between two cities. We don't know who did it. So the elders of the city, they bring this calf, and they take the axe, and they cut into the back of the neck.
Wouldn't the cow be a suspect? He's right next to the body.
The cow is not a suspect. The cow was not there when it happened, and the cows are non-violent. So, right, you're not killing the cow because he's a suspect, right? He's the offering, okay, of atonement. So you chop with the axe in the back of the neck. That's our egla arufa, okay? So here's what it says by the egla arufa. Dama rachmana. The pasuk says ha-arufa. This is the calf that is decapitated. Keshehi shleima tihave. From the fact that it says ha-arufa means it is whole when it is decapitated. It is not a treifa. It must be a real, good, viable animal. The leichush dilma treifahi. So then if you are chopping this animal, right? So now you're not supposed, and then afterwards, you're not supposed, when you're supposed to dispose of this animal, you bury it, you're not supposed to open it up or check it in any way, right? The animal remains as is. So, well, why not? Maybe the animal's a treifa. And you just did egla rufa on a treifa animal, and therefore it's no good. Halav mishum damrin zil basaruba must be because you go after the rove. The animal can be presumed to be good. V'chi tema mai nafkamina. Well, you say, well, who cares? If it's a treifa here, nobody's eating it anyway. It's also bahana. You can't get any benefit out of the egla rufa. Who cares if the egla rufa is a treifa? The answer is, Amri debei Rabbi Yanai. They said in the yeshiva Rabbi Yanai, kapara ksivba. It is called an atonement kekodshim, which means that it has the same rules as a kodshim, and therefore it cannot have blemishes and it cannot be a treifa. And that one sticks. That one sticks. We'll do one more. Okay. Rabbi Bar Rav Shila Amar. Rabbi Bar Shila says, Osumi paraduma. We're going to learn it from paraduma. Damar Rahman of the pasuk says, V'shachat v'saraf. You're supposed to shchit on the paraduma, and you're supposed to burn the paraduma. Ma shchita sa kishehi shlema. Just like when you slaughter the animal, it has to be a complete animal. Avsreifa sa kishehi shlema. You're going to burn the paraduma without cutting it into pieces. You just burn it whole, as is. So now, if you're never going to cut it open, you're going to check the inside of the animal. How do you know your paraduma is not a treifa? Elalav mishum damin until basaruba must be because we're relying on the majority. My nafkamina. Okay, fair point, but who cares? Maybe it could be a treifa. You're not eating the paraduma, you're burning it. So the answer is chatas kar yerachmana. The Torah calls it a korban chatos, a sin offering, and therefore it has to have the rules of a korban chatos that it cannot have any blemishes. Okay, there's a place for us to good place for us to stop. We've got a good couple of proofs behind us already about the rules of rove.
Beautiful. Oh yeah.
Now about that joke.